Welcome to my channel, it's Reuben Curé with another video all about matter sketching. In the years since I've been sketching, which has been, I suppose, about 13 years now since I've been a really regular sketcher, I've come to learn over the years that it's a fantastic tool to try and keep calm. So I'm not the most calm person by nature, far from it. There are situations that just rile me up. They just rile me up and they set my nerves a jangling. And sometimes I feel, am I the least calm person in the room? But I think everybody is inclined to get set off by situations from time to time. It could be a family gathering that just makes you want to run to another room and take a few deep breaths. Or it could be, for example, when you're on a plane and the turbulence kicks in and you're thinking, okay, this time sketching isn't going to work. It's not going to take my mind off the impending doom. But it always does, even though you know you're just trying to trick yourself. As soon as you start sketching and trying to get those lines to come out right for you, you just can't focus on anything else. And all the fretty thoughts seem to just, fall by the wayside. Such was the case the other day when I was caring for a relative, and I was beginning to get a little bit, edgy and on my nerves. And I took myself off to a quiet room and I started to sketch the view out of the window. And I was fairly confident, just because of my experience as a sketcher, that it would work as it always does. And sure enough, within about 20 seconds, I felt myself calm down and start concentrating on getting the shapes right and the colours right and so on. There are 5 things that you should consider if you want a successful sketch, and I'm going to describe them for you now. And within those 5 things, they can be broken down into all their different elements. But number 1 is composition, including what you want to include. Number 2 is scale, making things not too big, not too small. Number 3 is accurate drawing, making sure that things have the shapes they're supposed to have. Number 4 is getting your colour palette right and not including too many colours and making it all, a big cacophony of colours. And number 5 is using your values to best effect and to best impact. So I used all 5 of those elements in the sketch that's coming up, and I'm going to show you what I did and how I did it, and hopefully you might pick up something useful. Here's the view, a nice view out of a bedroom window across the street. Now, the first thing I have to think of is composition. And for me, that was pretty obvious. It was the window. And I wanted to make sure I got all the pictures lined up on the windowsill as well. So that's my composition, with making sure to get the building, the house across the street in as well. The second thing to consider, step 2, is scale. So I love those photo frames and I love the photos in them, and I really want to have the fun of drawing the people in them, and that means I can't draw them too small. So I suppose the scale of the photos sets the scale of the drawing as a whole, because if the photo frames are too small, there isn't going to be much fun in actually drawing the contents of the frames. So the third thing you want to consider comes up pretty quickly, and that is accurate drawing. And I have used those photo frames to guide me to the next photo frame to draw. So I don't draw any full shape before I've filled in a few lines of the object around it or next to it. And that way I compare everything to the shape and size of the thing it's right next to, and I keep everything in proportion that way. It's not that complicated. It sounds more complicated in telling you about it than it actually is. It's a technique that has been used, forever really, by artists since time immemorial, because it means that you can really rely on your sketch to be strong and true and solid. This is a photo of my grandmother and my great-grandmother, my grandmother's brother and sister. And it's an old sepia-toned photo, and it's really beautiful. And it's one that I suppose I'm a little bit sorry ended up being so small. I mean, it's always a play off what detail you want to get in overall and what you can't fit in. But this particular photo is so beautiful in its sepia tones that I am going to do it again. I'm going to draw it again, and I'm going to get a chance to get a bit more detail in, and I'm looking forward to that. Now, this one is a photo of my mum and her 2 brothers. My mum and her brothers are Canadian, and my mum emigrated to Ireland in the 1960s, well, 50s, I suppose, but met my dad in the 1960s. And these are her two brothers on either side of her, and they're also so glamorous, this Canadian trio with their suntans and their flashing white teeth and their blonde hair and all the rest of it. And these things were all in rather short supply in Ireland in the 1950s, I suppose. But I love this photo because everyone's smiling and happy, and I really enjoyed adding the sunlight on all their bodies when the time came to paint. But very nice. And you can see that I'm using the Fude pen in different line widths. You will find that a Fude pen is so useful because it offers you 3 line widths: narrow, broad and medium. And this is my wonderful grandmother. This is the lady who was the little girl in the photo on the far left. And my grandmother was so glamorous. She was always so glamorous, and she's so beautiful, and I'm loving drawing her here in this picture in her big hat. And then on the far right we've got a couple of photos of dear close friends of my mother's. Now I'm starting to put the foliage in, and this is again the same step, drawing accurately step, and I'm trying to get the house across the street in. Now I did make a little bit of a mistake. You can see that line above the roof pitch of the house. It was supposed to be the top side of the window frame, and it ended up being wrong. Luckily, there was lots of telegraph wires and so on, electricity wires going across the street, so I was just able to incorporate it into the other wires and kind of camouflage it that way. But I'm drawing in all my leaves of the camellia bush outside the window, and I'm adding in the curtain and a few bits of detail for the foliage, and I'm just populating the sketch, really making sure that everything is where it should be by measuring by eye, eyeballing all the shapes that I make, and then putting them in as and when I think they are correct. Okay, time for a little bit of paint. I'm using my Roman Schmal paints that in a set I have curated, and I always have a little jar of water to hand, and I can fill up my little vial, my little glass vial of water, so I never have to worry about running out of water in my little tiny water brush. Now the first thing I'm doing is adding the shadows under the photos, because they're not shadows, they're actually reflections. There wasn't much in the way of strong sunlight when I was doing this part of the sketch. And no sooner had I finished that the sun came out quite strongly. And of course it cast shadows which are different from reflections. It cast shadows from all those photo frames. So a reflection and a shadow are easy to tell apart. The reflection is vertically underneath the object doing the reflecting. But a shadow is usually at an angle. And of course you can have both. You can have both at the same time. I'm trying to respect the values here in the house across the street by making them dark against the sky. But we'll come on to that in a second. Let's talk about step 4, the colour palette. So the way I decide on my colours I'm going to use is I ask myself, are there any colours that have to be there? And if the answer to that is yes, then I'll base my colour palette on those colours. And I know that I have to have green for the foliage. I know that I have to have brown for the sepia tinted photo. And I know that I have to have black and white, we'll say, for the black and white photos. And for that I'm using Payne's Grey and perhaps a little bit of velvet black, which I happen to have in my palette as well. I don't want my colour of green to be too vivid compared to everything else. I don't even know why. Maybe I could have got away with some really bright greens. But no, I went for a very soft muted Aquarius green, which is a soft olive green that Reuben Curé does, that I really love. And it's a colour I use time and time again. So much for my colour palette. We've got the dark sludgy green. We've got the black and white, we'll say, or the neutrals. We've got the browns, we've got the Naples yellow of the window frame itself, and then I did add a little bit of very, very light blue-green to the curtain, and I was very happy to add the pink flowers onto the curtain fabric itself, because there was pink in the skin tones of the people in the frames. So the photos were black and white and they were sepia, but they were also in colour, and I was able to use the pink tones of the cheeks and the skin tones, and that way I was able to mimic that, or let's say repeat that pink colour in the curtain, and in that way it didn't clash in any way. I also didn't feel that the light blue-green clashed with the central foliage, because they are, of course, all in the green family. There was one thing I did slightly differently. I added a turquoise from my mother's sweater in the middle of the photo frame, but that one was a little bit, kind of rested a little bit uneasily with me. So, you know, I'm a little bit of a stickler for colour palette, and it would have been better if I'd repeated that colour somewhere else. I suppose you could argue that the blue-green of the curtain fabric goes well with that one as well. Lastly, we come to step 5, which is values. The 5th thing to consider when you are making a successful sketch. Now, you might have heard the phrase, colour gets all the glory, but values do all the work. And it really is the case. Values are what makes things pop. It's what makes things look three-dimensional. It's what makes things look like the sky is bright behind a building. Values are really such a useful tool to know about, and it just means darkening things up in relation to something else. That's basically what values are. So do consider strongly values when you're making a sketch, and it's something that I will come back to time and time again. So there you go, there's my finished sketch, and it was very, very enjoyable to do, and had the great added advantage of making me feel very calm by the time I'd finished. Well, here's Reuben, and I've just brought him in from outside where he's been running around. He has a job, by the way. I bought him a new bed based on my mother's recommendation. Her dog on the east coast of Bray suffers with extreme anxiety, and is very, very bothered every year when fireworks season comes around. And my mother's tried so many different things, but she did buy her little dog Babette a beautiful fluffy bed called Mr. Fluffy Friend. And she said, Roisin, she said, I don't know what kind of idiot I am to spend €50 on a dog bed, but she said she absolutely loves it. And I looked at Babette curled up in her little fluffy bed, and I thought, I want one of those for Reuben. Now, it didn't quite set me back €50. I don't know if I got a smaller one. It was a bit less than that. But when I got it, I thought Reuben better like it. And the funny thing was, he spent ages sniffing it and testing it to see if it was safe. But he hasn't been out of it since, and he looks so cute in his little Mr. Fluffy Friend. And Reuben's new job is to tell people about it, and it's kind of his second job, really, because his main job is looking cute in my videos, because he doesn't have any other jobs. I've told you, I'm sure, that I got him to keep the rodents down, and he's completely terrified of absolutely everything when it comes to keeping our family safe. But so Reuben now has an affiliate link thing going with Mr. Fluffy Friend. So if you do get one, based on what you see of Reuben enjoying his, then I guess I don't know, I'll buy Reuben a toy or something, and I'll show that if I get enough pennies together to buy him something nice. So it did take me 20 seconds to say 5 things to consider for a successful sketch, but those 5 things they're not necessary for any particular sketch. You can do what you like, but I do find that if I apply them in my work, they are going to work every time. I do know that. Why are you squeaking? Reuben's squeaking. So in future videos, I will kind of delve into that more, and I will tease it out and maybe make some videos with that exact thing in mind, just to break it down to its most basic and most simple elements. However, I will say that the fun is in the learning. The fun is in the journey. So even though we all love to have a beautiful sketch and it's lovely to have it, it's the making of it that's the best bit. It really is. And challenging yourself to overcome all the little problems that you have to find solutions for when you're making a drawing. And that's what we all love. That's what we're doing it here for. So the 5 things that I've mentioned, those are all techniques and approaches. However, the materials that you use is a whole other world. And of course, kit is equally as fun as the technique and the approach. So I will leave it at that, and I will say thank you so much for watching. I hope you got something useful out of today's sketch, and I wish you, from me and from Reuben, happy sketching.